is up in the corner on the first page. It's a quotation from de Tocqueville, the French aristocrat who was very concerned about the consequences of the French Revolution in his country, particularly a kind of excessive individualism that he thought left nothing between a very powerful state and isolated individuals. And he came to America in the 1830s to learn about American democracy and wrote a very smart book about it called Democracy in America. In a democracy, he said, knowledge of how to combine is the mother of all forms of knowledge. On it depends all others. In other words, that effective democratic governance is not only a question of the protection of individual liberties, but also the creation of collective capacity.
When I want to meet someone, I just say, hey, I have you in class, or I've seen you around, my name's Nellie, and basically I introduce myself.
Yeah, so what are you doing when you do that? I mean, when you just said, hey, right? Okay, so hey. And then what'd you do?
I introduced myself, I said my name.
But first you said something else.
I've seen you in class,
Okay.
or we were in this group together, or
yeah, you
we've worked together before.
So you went to some common experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or some common connection. Nellie, how would you go from what you started to do?
Most of the time, they say something that's really interesting that I probably know more about, or I don't know enough about. So I would say, you mentioned something about capital gains tax. Can you explain that? I would really like your input on that.
Ooh.
You know?
So what's she offering there? Yeah.
Well, she let that person know that she was interested in the same thing they were good at.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
they had
very
that
good.
in common.
Very good. See how this works? I mean, all that in just a couple sentences. Then comes this part, the exploration part. You know, this is the asking and answering, finding motivations, finding the space, finding places of shared interest, finding places of shared resource, of perhaps shared values, finding ground for building a relationship. Remember about the significance of each person's particularity. I mean, and sort of how you get at particularity, and then get at the interests and resources that are embedded within that particularity. That's where the action is. Okay? That's really where the action is in organizing.
In our culture, there's sort of a bias. It's kind of like dependence is bad, independence is good. You know, the reality is that most of our lives are about interdependence. They're about interrelationship with others, because others hold resources that we need, right, in order to address our interests. But for others to be motivated to enter into a relationship with us, they also have some interests that need to be satisfied by resources we have. What it makes possible is a kind of exchange, okay, a kind of exchange.
Yeah, James.
Her interest was, I guess, knowing that she is included.
And your interest was?
My interest was learning how to get her and more people like her to get involved.
And your resource to her was?
The activities that I do and the invitations I can give her to get involved. Her resource to me was her ideas and her networks of people that she said she's going to try to bring to the table next time we do an event.
No, that's good. Now, let's just stay with that for a second. Was anything else exchanged in this conversation?
Yeah.
What?
A lot of stuff. We both talked about our histories. We both talked about, and it was interesting because I didn't know this woman, and
Yeah.
for us to talk about race and, white and allies and
Yeah.
struggles and
Yeah.
identity, there was a lot exchanged there.
See, it isn't just about organizational interests in, on either end. It isn't just at this abstract level that relationships work. Relationships are between individuals.
So there we were, like, we just told really, really personal stories, and then you were saying it's time to wrap up, and she said, we should talk about that. The last thing I said, she said, we should talk about that, because I could say something more about it. And that's when we came to commitment. So in some ways it felt like so much, so quickly.
Yeah, yeah.
But I also, sometimes I'll meet with people forever and ever and ever, and
Yeah.
and it feels like we're going deep, so I feel like I should stay there.
What does that tell about commitment? Just what she just said.
Ask.
Huh?
Ask for it.
Yeah, you got to ask, right? And somebody's got to ask, right? It's not just going to bubble up out of nowhere, right? Somebody's got to say, oh, well, why don't we? Or how about if we? It sort of goes back to George's point, right? About the significance of initiative in the relationship in terms of taking responsibility for moving it somewhere, without a commitment to a future, then you had a nice exchange of information beginning and end. But nothing really gets built that turns out to be of value for the future. So this commitment piece is a critical second dimension of relationship.
We have interests in resources, not all we are, okay? It's not all we are. Let me see here. Karen, who are you?
I'm a person, I'm a woman.
Okay, now there's a lot of people fit that category. Who else are you?
I'm a hiker, or used to be. I'm a kind of dabbling in gardening.
If you think, okay, he's not just asking me about what categories I belong to. He's asking me something a little different. He's asking me something about my uniqueness. Have you always supported Democratic candidates forever?
Well, usually, we all need to have a decent chance to make a living. You know, I think that we all, you know, should not be set, the game should not be so loaded in favor of a few people, you know.
So why do you think that? A lot of people don't think that in this country. Why do you think that?
I suppose that's, I don't know, I suppose that's what I was taught, you know. I don't
Who
know.
taught you that?
And whether, you know, went to the, you know, counted votes, you know, at the election thing every year. She did that, but they weren't really active, no.
Well, she had certainly a sense of civic
So
responsibility. involved in that.
she has a civic sense. I've been a hiker for a long time. I mean, like I worked when I was about 20. I worked for the Sierra, for Yosemite 3 times. I was,
And what attracted you to that? Why?
I didn't know what to do, so I just wanted to go to the mountains.
What did the mountains do for you?
I just like nature a lot, you know. I guess I go and I see some animals, I see some plants, and I just feel better, you know. And it just kind of explains things to me. I figure I'm kind of like nature, and you know, there's something. I guess it's a metaphor for other things.
What you just described to us about how you feel in the mountains, you think that's at risk now?
Of course, it's a risk now. Of course, it's a risk. I mean, a bill just passed the House for salvage logging to make it easier, so there's less restrictions for
Yeah.
logging. That hasn't passed the Senate yet, but
Do you think that feeling is precious only to you?
I don't think so. No,
A lot of people share that
I
feeling.
think it's precious to lots of
To a lot of
people. Yeah, I'm sure lots of people in this room.
What was I just asking Karen to tell us? The story, right? I want to know, I mean, the thing that is utterly unique about each of us is not the categories that we belong to, but what? Our stories. Our stories sum up our identities. I mean, it's our journey. It's like where we began, it's the choices we made, it's what has made us who we are, and it's what shapes where we go. Part of what happens then in a relationship is not only interests and resources exchange, but something else. Each of us comes to an encounter with another person with a story, right? What am I pointing to? What am I identifying here? Choices. And what do you, when a person describes the choices that they made, when they confronted a choice, they went one way instead of the other, what are they letting you know about themselves? Their values. A lot of times we want to talk with another person and learn from them and have them learn about us, but we don't feel we have permission. It's kind of like, ooh, it's going to be misinterpreted or whatever. And sort of part of what this does is to create a kind of a safe space, a way to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. And so it gives permission, in a way, to ask questions you might not otherwise ask, but that are very important. And so that's another reason for thinking of this as something intentional. Call it a one-on-one meeting.
Well, you asked, how did it get easier? You know, and so
Yeah.
for me, it was sort of transitioning from, you know, the how and the how did I feel, and more towards just sort of a narrative of events. That seemed to feel easy.
And which felt more powerful to you, Marty?
When I was asking her,
Yeah. When did you really understand what makes?
when I felt like I had to probe a little bit more and ask her what made her have the reactions or the attitudes that she has about things, why she feels the way she does about things.
So maybe what was easy wasn't necessarily what let you understand Patty most easily.
Right. What it sounds like what she perceives as more difficult to answer was what I got the most out of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah.
The time thing is really interesting because what you said about you've known each other for a long time, but you took 15 minutes to just focus on each other. And it's really amazing how much you can learn in such a short period of time when you're really paying attention. A lot of it is about attention. It's about focus, a whole lot of it. And so part of the art of relationship building is learning how to focus on another person and let them focus on you so you can really learn from each other. And it doesn't take 10 years. It can take 10 minutes to have a useful, insightful exchange.
Anyone who works with people faces this challenge of how to maintain integrity in their relationships, treat other people as ends, not as means, yet understand that there is a personal dimension to that public relationship, if I'm making if this is clear. It's particularly true in organizing and in politics. Because when you assume a public role, you sort of have then a responsibility to have a public account of yourself, right? People were concerned about the question of manipulation and intentionality and authenticity in relationships and so forth. The dimensions here are habitual behavior, mindful behavior, okay? This is like, you know, I'm intentional, I'm thinking. This is, I'm just reacting the way I always react. That's on one scale. The other one is concealing behavior and disclosing behavior. A lot of interaction that we have in professional settings, like in public kind of work, like we talked about, falls somewhere in here. Now, if it's concealing and intentional, that's what she describes as the domain of manipulation. There is intentionality, but it's coupled with concealment. Now, this over here, where you just react, but you react in a concealing way, that's kind of like defensive, protective behavior. Over here, where you react, but you react in a disclosing way, that's like you get so angry that you tell somebody what you think, even though you didn't really want to tell them what you thought, or may not. And then down here is this domain of being both mindful and disclosing. Now, this is what I'd argue is where organizing goes, right here. Where the behavior, where you're interacting with people with intentionality and purposefulness, but you can be transparent about what it's all about. It's damn hard to get out there, start talking to people you don't know, get quickly to something real, like you just talked about. What's so scary about all that?
Fear of rejection.
Yeah, that's often a big one. And what's just as scary as fear of rejection?
Judgment.
How about fear of acceptance? How about the other side of it? Like, oh, geez, they may actually take me out. Then we're in. See, it's both sides, isn't it? I mean, it's both sides of it. I mean, it can come at you from both sides, right? Because there really is something real at stake.